The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the sound of shovels hitting the earth. Emily stood beside the grave, her black dress clinging to her as the wind swept through the cemetery. Her hands trembled as she held on to Liam's small fingers. At only 5 years old, he barely understood why everyone was crying, why his father's body was lowered into the ground, and why his mother's face looked so pale and broken. Emily's heart felt like it was splitting in two. Daniel was gone, her husband, her partner, her best friend. The man who used to hold her hand through every storm, the man who told her she was stronger than she believed. Now he was lying beneath the soil, and she felt like her entire world had collapsed with him. People whispered softly around her. Some wept, some offered short words of comfort, but it all sounded distant, like echoes she couldn't reach. All she wanted was Daniel back. All she wanted was to hear his voice one last time. When the service ended, mourners began to drift away. Margaret, Daniel's mother, hugged Emily gently, her eyes red and swollen. "Stay strong, dear," she whispered. Emily clung to her for a moment, grateful for at least one kind word in this endless darkness. But then Richard stepped forward, Daniel's father. His face was stern, almost cold, the same expression Emily had seen too many times before. He didn't hug her. He didn't look at Liam. Instead, he leaned in close, his voice low but sharp, like a knife sliding into her chest. "You should start packing your things," he said. "This house was Daniel's, not yours. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Emily froze. For a second, she thought she had misheard. Her husband had just been buried. Her son was clutching her hand. And yet, instead of comfort, she was being told to leave. Her lips parted, but no words came. She could barely breathe. Shock rippled through her body, leaving her weak and unsteady. She had expected tears, maybe even anger from Richard. But not this. Not this cruel dismissal. Not on the very day she had lost the love of her life. What? Emily finally managed, her voice breaking. Richard's eyes were hard. "You heard me. The sooner you go, the better. Don't think you can stay in that house. It's not yours to keep." He straightened and walked away as if nothing had happened, leaving Emily standing there, trembling, her heart pounding in her chest. Liam tugged at her hand, looking up with innocent eyes. "Mommy, are we going home now?" he asked softly. Emily forced herself to nod, though tears blurred her vision. But inside, she was falling apart. How could she explain to her little boy that the place he called home, the place filled with his father's memories, was being taken away from him? The funeral was supposed to mark the end of one heartbreak. Instead, it had opened the door to another. And Emily knew, with a sickening weight in her chest, that this was only the beginning of her battle. Emily had met Daniel 8 years ago on a rainy afternoon in the city library. She had gone there to escape the weather, clutching a wet umbrella, her hair sticking to her face. Daniel was seated at a corner table, flipping through a history book. He noticed her struggling to wipe down her chair and smiled. That small act of kindness, offering her his jacket so she could sit, was the beginning of everything. At first, their worlds couldn't have been more different. Emily came from a modest family, raised by a single mother who worked long hours as a nurse. Daniel, on the other hand, was from a well-known family in town, with a father who owned several businesses and carried himself with pride and authority. Still, none of that mattered to Daniel. He loved Emily's honesty, her warmth, and the way she made even ordinary days feel meaningful. They dated quietly at first, stealing moments between her classes and his long hours working at his father's company. He always told her, "You're my calm in all this noise." Emily never forgot those words. He made her feel like she belonged somewhere, finally, and she loved him for that. When Daniel told his parents about her, Margaret had welcomed Emily with gentle kindness. She would hold Emily's hands and say, "My son is smiling again, and that's enough for me." But Richard had been different from the start. His eyes often scanned Emily as though weighing her worth, and he never hid his disapproval. "She doesn't come from money," Emily once overheard him telling Daniel. "What can she bring to this family? She's not what you need." But Daniel stood firm. He loved Emily, and he married her despite the objections. That decision created a quiet wall between him and his father, one that never fully came down. Richard tolerated Emily's presence, but never accepted her. Every family gathering reminded her of it. His sharp comments, his dismissive looks, his way of making her feel small without saying much at all. When Liam was born, Emily thought things might change. Surely a grandchild would soften Richard's heart. And for a moment she hoped. Margaret doted on Liam, showering him with love and warmth, and Richard did hold him once with a faint smile. But soon his coldness returned. He loved Liam in his own way, but he treated Emily as though she was merely a guest who had overstayed her welcome. Despite the tension, Emily and Daniel built a happy life together. They didn't have riches, but they had love. Daniel worked hard at his father's company, while Emily devoted herself to caring for Liam. They had dreams, one day opening a small cafe together, raising Liam in a home filled with laughter and security. But all those dreams were cut short the night Daniel never came home. The accident had stolen him in an instant, leaving Emily with a 5-year-old child and a heart that felt shattered beyond repair. As the days after the funeral passed, reality began to sink in. Daniel had left no will. No papers named her as the rightful owner of their home or guardian of his savings. Everything, by default, was in Richard's control. He reminded her of that with a cold certainty. "You don't have anything here," he said one evening when she tried to talk to him. "This house, the accounts, the business, they were Daniel's. And now they are mine to handle. You should start thinking about where to go." His words left her hollow. Emily had never worked a steady job after Liam was born. Daniel had always told her not to worry, that he would take care of them. But now he was gone, and she had no safety net. Margaret tried to comfort her in whispers when Richard wasn't listening. "I wish I could change his mind," she said, brushing Liam's hair one afternoon. "But he doesn't listen to me. He never has." Emily held back her tears in front of her son, but when she was alone, she wept silently. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for Liam. He was only 5, too young to understand, too innocent to know that the home he ran through laughing, the bedroom filled with his toys, and the garden where Daniel once played ball with him were all being taken away. At night, Emily lay awake listening to Liam's steady breathing, her hand resting on his small back. The fear gnawed at her. If she couldn't give him stability, if she couldn't protect him from Richard's cold hand, what kind of mother would she be? She had already lost Daniel. The thought of losing the home they built together, the only safe space Liam had ever known, felt like another kind of death. But deep inside her grief, something else began to stir, a small, stubborn flame. If Richard thought he could erase her and push her aside, he was wrong. Emily didn't know how yet, but she knew one thing: she would fight. The days after the funeral passed in a blur. Emily moved through the house like a ghost, tidying things that didn't need tidying, cooking meals she barely ate. Liam clung to her constantly, asking questions she didn't know how to answer. "When is Daddy coming back? Why are people so sad?" Each time, her heart broke all over again. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Richard knocked on her door. His presence filled the living room like a shadow. Emily straightened, already bracing herself. "I won't waste words," he said flatly. "You have 1 week to leave this house." Emily's breath caught. 1 week? "Richard, this is Liam's home. My home. Daniel would never." "Daniel is gone," he interrupted sharply. "And this was never your house to begin with. You've lived here on his goodwill, nothing more. Don't act like you own what isn't yours." Her hands shook as she tried to steady her voice. "Where do you expect me to take Liam? He's only a child. He just lost his father." "That's not my problem," Richard said, cold as stone. "You've leaned on Daniel long enough. It's time you stand on your own." When he left, Emily collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. The walls around her, once filled with laughter and Daniel's presence, suddenly felt like they were closing in. That night, while going through some of Daniel's papers, Emily stumbled across a receipt tucked into an old book on his desk. It mentioned a deposit, large sums of money, into an account she had never heard of. Her heart raced. Could it be possible? Had Daniel been saving something secretly, something just for her and Liam? Hope flickered inside her. The next morning, she gathered her courage and went to Richard. She held out the paper. "What is this?" Daniel had another account. For a brief moment, she saw something flicker across his face, quickly masked by his usual hardness. He took the paper from her hand, glanced at it, and scoffed. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said. "I do," Emily pressed. "If Daniel had savings, they should go to me and Liam. He would have wanted us cared for." Richard's eyes narrowed. His voice turned cruel. "Don't fool yourself. You were nothing but a burden to him. A parasite, feeding off his hard work. That money, if it exists, is under my control, and I won't hand it over to someone who contributed nothing." Emily staggered back as though struck. His words sank deep, each one cutting into her already fragile heart. She wanted to scream, to tell him how much Daniel had loved her, how much she had sacrificed for their family. But Richard's expression told her it was useless. He had already decided who she was in his mind, unworthy, disposable. Later that evening, Margaret slipped quietly into Emily's room. She closed the door gently, glancing over her shoulder to make sure Richard wasn't nearby. Her hands trembled as she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "Daniel left this for you," she whispered. "I was afraid to give it earlier, but you need it now. Don't let Richard see it." Emily stared at the envelope, her chest tightening. Slowly, she opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter in Daniel's familiar script. "My dearest Emily, the letter began, 'If you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. Please know that you and Liam were my everything. I made some arrangements I couldn't tell my father about, because I knew he would try to take control. Trust your instincts, Emily. Protect our son. The truth will come to you when you need it most." Emily pressed the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. For the first time since the funeral, she felt Daniel's presence, his voice guiding her. The mention of secrets hidden from Richard sent a shiver down her spine. Margaret touched her arm gently. Richard has kept things from you. He always has. You must be careful, but don't give up. Daniel believed in you. Emily looked at her son sleeping in the next room, his small hand clutching his toy car. A quiet strength rose inside her. Richard might think she was powerless, but Daniel's words reminded her of something she had forgotten. She was not alone in this fight. She wiped her tears, folded the letter, and hid it safely. For Liam, for Daniel, for herself, she would not walk away quietly. If Richard wanted a battle, then Emily woke up each morning with a pit in her stomach. Since Richard had ordered her to leave, every day felt like a ticking clock counting down to the moment she and Liam would have nowhere to go. She tried to find work, anything that could give her a little security. She sent out applications, walked into shops, and asked if they needed help. Most places shook their heads. Others told her kindly that they wanted someone with more recent experience. It had been years since she last worked. She had devoted herself to Liam and the home she shared with Daniel. Now that choice haunted her. Every rejection chipped away at her hope. She came home exhausted, clutching Liam's hand, only to find Richard waiting with his sharp words. You see? You can't even get a job. What did I tell Daniel? A woman like you only drains a man. Emily tried to ignore him, but his voice followed her everywhere, like a shadow she couldn't escape. Soon the whispers began spreading among other relatives. A cousin who came by to pay respects looked at Emily with thinly veiled judgment. I heard you depended on Daniel for everything, she said. Uncle Richard says he worked himself sick trying to support you. Emily's face burned. She wanted to defend herself, but words caught in her throat. She realized Richard was poisoning everyone's mind, painting her as the selfish widow who had nothing to offer. One night, when Liam was asleep, Emily sat by the small desk in her room and pulled out Daniel's letter again. She read the words slowly, as if they carried hidden clues. I made some arrangements I couldn't tell my father about, she whispered. What arrangements? She searched through drawers, Daniel's old briefcase, even the attic, until she finally found a thin folder tucked behind a stack of old bills. Inside were property documents, an investment Daniel had made quietly in a small apartment building. The papers were stamped with his name, but another set of documents showed a transfer of handling rights to Richard after Daniel's death. Her hands shook. So Daniel had tried to secure something for their future, but Richard had hidden it. He had lied to her face. Margaret found her crying quietly that night. She sat beside her, wrapping her arm around her shoulders. I knew he was keeping something, she said softly. Your husband wanted to protect you. Richard is pretending there's nothing, but the truth is, he doesn't want to lose control. Please, Emily, be careful. If he finds out you know, he will come after you harder. But how can I fight him? Emily whispered. He has everything, the money, the power, the family on his side. I have nothing. Margaret squeezed her hand. You have Liam, and you have Daniel's wishes. Don't let Richard erase that. The next day, Emily reached out to Naomi, an old friend from college who had become a lawyer. They met at a small cafe, where Emily spilled everything. The funeral, the threats, the hidden property, the cruel words. Naomi listened carefully, her sharp eyes narrowing with each detail. You can fight this legally, Naomi said. If Daniel invested in that property, then Liam, as his son, has a right to it. And as his guardian, you do too. Richard has no authority to push you out if we prove this. Emily's heart beat faster. But what if he destroys the document? What if he twists everything against me? That's what men like him do, Naomi replied firmly. But that's why you need to stand your ground. You're not powerless, Emily. You just have to decide you're ready. That night, Liam curled into her lap as they sat on the couch. His little voice was soft but heavy with question. Mommy, why can't we stay in Daddy's house? This is where Daddy used to read me stories. This is where he played with me. Why do we have to leave? Emily's throat tightened. She stroked his hair, fighting back tears. Because sometimes people forget what's right, she said gently. But I promise you, sweetheart, I will do everything I can to keep us safe. His small arms wrapped around her neck. I don't want to leave, Mommy. Daddy's still here. Her chest ached. In that moment, she knew she couldn't give up. She couldn't let Richard erase Daniel's memory, or tear Liam away from the only home he knew. But the days grew heavier. Richard's pressure increased. Angry knocks on her door, threats whispered in the hallway, cold stares that reminded her time was running out. Family members began to avoid her, some too afraid to take her side, others already convinced she was nothing more than a widow clinging to what wasn't her. Margaret became her only ally, sneaking her food when Richard forgot to stock the pantry, slipping encouraging notes into her hands, and standing silently by Emily's side when the house felt unbearable. Each act of kindness was a small lifeline. Still, fear followed Emily everywhere. She hid Daniel's letter and the documents in a safe place, praying Richard wouldn't discover them. Every time she looked at Liam, she felt the weight of what was at stake. It wasn't just about her pride or survival, it was about her son's future. She thought of Daniel often, of the way he used to laugh and promise her that no matter what happened, he would take care of them. Now, in his absence, it was her turn to live up to that promise. Emily dried her tears, folded the documents carefully, and picked up her phone to call Naomi again. Her voice was steady this time. "You're right. I can't let him win. Tell me what I need to do." For the first time since Daniel's death, she felt something. The courtroom was packed, the air tense with whispers. Emily sat at the front beside Naomi, her palms damp with sweat. Liam was too young to understand, so Margaret had taken him outside. Still, Emily felt her son's presence like a weight on her shoulder. She had to win, for him, for Daniel, for everything she had already lost. Across the room sat Richard, his jaw set, his suit sharp as always. His eyes carried the same coldness she had felt since the funeral. But here, in front of the judge, he wore a mask of calm authority, as though he was the only one who truly knew what was best. The case began with Richard's lawyer painting Emily as a woman who had contributed nothing to the family. She lived under Daniel's roof, eating food she did not earn, spending money she did not bring in, the lawyer declared. Now she clings to assets that were never hers. Emily's heart pounded, but Naomi leaned close and whispered, "Stay strong. Don't let him rattle you." When it was Richard's turn to speak, he didn't hold back. He rose, voice booming through the courtroom. "My son carried this woman for years. She was a burden on him. Do you know why he worked so hard? To keep her comfortable. That pressure destroyed him. She drove him to an early grave." Gasps rippled through the room. Emily's breath caught. Tears burned in her eyes, but she forced herself not to cry. Richard's words were poison, but she couldn't let them break her. Naomi rose for the cross-examination. Her voice was calm but sharp. "Mr. Richard, you claim Emily was a burden. But isn't it true that Daniel made financial arrangements you knew nothing about?" Richard frowned. "There were no such arrangements." Naomi picked up a folded piece of paper and handed it to the judge. "This is a letter Daniel wrote to his wife before he passed. In it, he clearly states his love for her and his plans to provide for her and their son, even without your knowledge. Would you like me to read it aloud?" The judge nodded. Naomi unfolded the letter and read Daniel's handwriting in a steady voice. "My dearest Emily, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. Please know you and Liam were my everything. I made arrangements I could not share with my father because I knew he would interfere. Protect our son. The truth will come when you need it most." The room was silent. Emily's tears slipped down her cheeks. But this time they were not from despair. They were from the power of Daniel's words, his voice reaching across death to stand beside her. Naomi's gaze locked on Richard. "So tell me, Mr. Richard, if Daniel himself admitted he trusted his wife more than you, how can you claim she was a burden?" Richard's face tightened, his composure cracking. "That letter means nothing. She probably forced him to write it." At that moment, Margaret stood. She had been sitting quietly at the back, but her voice now carried with surprising strength. "Enough, Richard." All eyes turned to her. She stepped forward, tears in her eyes but her spine straight. "You have twisted this family for too long. Daniel loved Emily. He told me many times that she gave him peace. You resented her because she didn't come from money, but you never saw the truth. She was his happiness. And now you want to take away what little she has left. Shame on you." Richard's head whipped toward her. "Margaret, sit down," he barked. But she didn't. "No, Richard. I've sat in silence for years. Not today." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Naomi pressed forward. "Your Honor, we also have property documents Daniel signed. These prove he invested in real estate and, more importantly, left it in Liam's name. Emily, as Liam's guardian, is the rightful overseer of that estate." She handed the stamped documents to the judge, who examined them carefully. Richard's lawyer tried to object, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. The judge looked up. "These papers are clear. The property belongs to Daniel's son, Liam Carter. And as his mother and guardian, Emily Carter has every right to manage and live in the estate. Mr. Richard, your claims hold no legal ground." The finality in the judge's voice hit Richard like a hammer. His face drained of color. For a moment, he looked smaller, as though the weight of his own schemes had finally crushed him. He slumped back into his chair, his hands trembling, his control slipping away before everyone's eyes. Emily sat frozen, her chest rising and falling as if she had been holding her breath for weeks and was finally able to exhale. Naomi touched her shoulder, whispering, "You did it." Tears blurred Emily's vision as Margaret came forward, clutching her hand. "You're free now, Emily. Free from him." For the first time since Daniel's death, Emily felt something she thought she'd lost forever: hope.